Shana Tova. It was the morning of the first day of 5784, and I stood before 250 people in their 20s and 30s at the congregation I served as rabbinic fellow for the last 2 years, B'nai Jeshurun in Manhattan. We were most of the way through the service, but a huge moment was about to occur. The great Aleinu, the dramatic lead up to the shofar service. And I decided to try something, and I offered this intention. It's traditional during the great Aleinu, I explained, to kneel down on the floor of the sanctuary, bowing your forehead all the way down to the ground out of submission to God. But this language of submission to God is alienating and kind of strange. Rather, when we do this, we are acknowledging not just to God or to a higher power, but also to ourselves, that even when we do everything in our power to make something happen, it is not all up to us. Some things are beyond our control. When we offer the great Aleinu and place ourselves in this posture, we express through this physical demonstration of our spiritual awareness and vulnerability that we might yet achieve a closeness to something greater than ourselves and a closeness to one another. I invited the congregation to move to an open space in the aisles, and when it came time, to kneel down with me. I added that as we reach the ground, we would take a moment of silence to further underscore our vulnerability. So, would the congregation go along with it? I had no idea. As I faced the open ark and I sang the great Aleinu, I lowered my forehead to the ground, and the entire kahal, the whole congregation, fell silent for about 30 seconds. When I rose, I noticed that the young woman who had been holding open the ark had an expression of awe with tears running down her face. After the service, I found her and I asked her what inspired that reaction. She looked at me surprised. "Oh, you don't know?" I shook my head, "No." Every person in the congregation put their face to the ground. Every person took the opportunity to express what it might feel like to be vulnerable or lack control. And what's more, they did it in front of each other as one community. But this year is different. Without the words of our liturgy or choreographed rituals, we have already felt more vulnerable than perhaps we ever have before. We felt vulnerable on October 7th when our Israeli brothers and sisters and siblings were ruthlessly attacked, when 1,200 of our family members were murdered and 251 taken hostage. We felt vulnerable when our role models and friends chose sides without so much knowledge or nuance. We felt vulnerable when our institutions of higher learning, which had stood up against injustices in past years, fell silent. We felt vulnerable when professors on those campuses, whom we entrusted to inspire us and teach us, offered Hamas, solidarity, and even praise. We felt vulnerable when our allies with whom we rallied and protested and pounded the pavement in our efforts to ensure basic human rights to everyone in this country abandoned us. We felt vulnerable when women's health and justice organizations around the world refused to acknowledge the rape of our sisters for months, if they ever did. We felt vulnerable as we were booed off of stages and barred from speaking engagements in institutions and even attacked on the street. We felt vulnerable when the bodies of 6 hostages were returned to Israel who had been alive just days before, and we did not save them. And on this first eve of the new year, when our hearts should be filled with such joy, we still feel vulnerable, knowing that 97 members of Am Yisrael cry out from captivity without rescue. We feel vulnerable as this war continues to rage on for far, far too long, claiming too many innocent lives to count. We feel vulnerable as rockets, just as recently as last night, continue to fall on Tel Aviv, on Haifa, and even our beloved Jerusalem, and uncertain fate sweeps across northern Israel. And we act when we're walking down the street. We act out of vulnerability when we hide our Jewish stars around our necks or decide not to wear them at all. In past years, we needed the great Aleinu to demonstrate to us that we are not in charge. This year, we have come to know that through our lived experiences. And yet here we are, and a new year is upon us, and Rosh Hashanah still offers a message that we need to hear. This year, I suggest we linger on a different prayer from our liturgy, like the Great Aleinu, a prayer from the shofar service. But instead of cultivating vulnerability, this prayer invites us to contemplate potential, to consider not only where we are, but where we might be going. Traditionally, on Rosh Hashanah morning, the prayer Hayom Harat Olam is recited 3 times, once after each of the 3 sets of shofar calls. These words, Hayom Harat Olam, are challenging to translate. In some machzorim, it is translated as, today is the birthday of the world. In others, today the world stands as at birth. And in our own Mishkan HaNefesh, it is rendered, today the world is born anew. All 3 translations mention birth, yet the operative Hebrew word harat does not mean born or birth at all. It means pregnant. So the line reads, today the world is pregnant. We can infer this translation from several passages in our Tanakh, our Hebrew Bible, in which a woman becomes pregnant. But the only instance in which the phrase Harat Olam is used comes to us from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 20. Jeremiah was not a bullfrog, but he was a prophet. And like many prophets, he did not choose this role. Bible translator Robert Alter writes that Jeremiah felt continual anguish over his prophetic call. But this is not so surprising. Thanks to his particularly gloomy and pessimistic prophecies, he was prohibited from going back to his hometown, a small village outside of Jerusalem. He was imprisoned multiple times, vilified over and over and over again, and even received death threats. But in 586 BCE, Jeremiah faced one of the most traumatic events in our history: the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem at the hands of the Babylonians. At this point, Jeremiah has been warning the Israelites for years that if they do not change their ways, if they cannot pull themselves away from false deities and return to God, there will be consequences. He goes so far as to pass on a message from God. He cries, God says, so will I smash this people and this city as one smashes a potter's vessel which can never be mended. But even in the face of these harsh words from God, the people remain stubborn as ever. By the time we arrive at chapter 20, the Babylonians are closing in on Jerusalem, and Jeremiah is beyond distraught. Talk about being vulnerable. Jeremiah even wishes that he were never born. It is in this moment of devastation that we find the words Harat Olam embedded in Jeremiah's reflection. With this phrase, he expresses a strange wish that his mom had stayed pregnant forever. Virachma Harat Olam. In other words, rather than giving birth to Jeremiah, he longs for his mother to have only lived forever with the potential of the life that she carried. Jeremiah longs to return to a time when everything about his existence, even the idea of his existence itself, was pure potential. I'm not sure if I would want anyone to be pregnant forever, so I'm not sure if I could put Jeremiah's mom in that position. Yet, if we think about it, Jeremiah's wish for his mother is actually quite wonderful in a way. Before a baby is born, parents allow themselves to dream. They envision what their children might look like, what kinds of sports they might enjoy, what hobbies they might have. They see them growing up, and they ask, what might our child be when they grow up? Barring any unforeseen circumstances, when a baby is on the way, the future is vast and open. Expecting parents may not just be pregnant, but their futures and their child's future are exhilaratingly and delightfully pregnant with possibilities. Beginnings in general are pure potential, the unfettered open road of possibility. At the beginning of any new chapter, whether it be the arrival of a new baby or moving into a new home or going out on a big trip or going to college or being ordained as a rabbi and then starting your rabbinate at Westchester Reform Temple, maybe that's not one that is really all of you. Maybe that's just me. In every anticipated new beginning, we get to dwell in this world of potential, gazing at the great expanse ahead where countless paths could unfold. Who will our children be? What dreams and aspirations might they achieve? On my trip, will I have the opportunity to see the beauty of rare wildlife? Will I go on a challenging hike with a view that makes it all worth it? At my new school, will I do sports or Greek life, attend Hillel, maybe join an a cappella group? Will I have a big group of friends or just a few really close ones? What kind of job will I land when I graduate? Hayom Harat Olam, as we stand here on Erev Rosh Hashanah, on the precipice of a new year, our eyes should be aglow with envisioning what this year could become. Hayom Harat Olam, no matter how difficult the chapter we are concluding, no matter how challenging the past year has been, we still affirm just how much potential we have, just how much this next year could be better. Hayom Harat Olam, in this moment we hold our breath with excitement, waiting to unwrap the gift that this year could be. Hayom Harat Olam, so many possibilities are laid out in front of us at this glorious moment. And yet, as the sculptor stares at a block of untouched clay, or the painter's brush hovers just over a blank canvas, there is not only potential for a masterpiece to come forth, but potential for a mess. There is another Hayom in our High Holiday liturgy, Another mention of today that acknowledges this too. Tomorrow, we will hear our cantors sing, Unetana tokef kedushat hayom. Let us declare the sacred power of this day, hayom, today. Ki hu nora va'ayom, for it is awe-inspiring and full of dread. As we imagine what this coming year might hold, what untold directions it might take, we pause to appreciate the vastness and the power that comes with a moment of pure potential. The words of this Hayom are actually the ultimate expression of uncertainty. Who will live and who will die? Who by fire and who by water? Potential can make us fearful, especially when we know that our clay is not exactly untouched and that our canvas is not fully blank, for we have had a year of fire and water. And yet Rosh Hashanah gives us an opportunity to bask in the glory of what could be, while we continue to hold and will always carry the devastation of this year. We must also dwell in the realm of possibility. At the beginning of each school year, a professor at New England Conservatory challenges his students to do just this. After the students take their seats on the first day in his graduate-level Art of Musical Composition class, he announces to them all that they've aced the class and will all receive an A. But there's one catch. Within the next 2 weeks, each student must write a letter to the professor dated in May, the date of the end of the school year, detailing why they deserve that A, what they did to deserve that A. In the book, The Art of Possibility, the professor Benjamin Zander writes that he tells his students, I'm especially interested in the person you will have become by next May. I am interested in the attitude, feelings, and worldview of that person who will have done all she wished to do or become everything he wanted to be. In one letter, a student wrote, that drive of energy and intense emotion that you saw dormant inside of me, yet alas, I could not show in performance or conversation, was freed tonight in a program of music composed just for me. Another student writes, I had the courage to examine my fears, and I realized that they have no place in my life. I changed from someone who was scared to make a mistake in case she was noticed to someone who knows that she has a contribution to make to other people, musically and personally. But the most remarkable part of the experience wasn't reading these beautiful letters. Rather, the professor reports it was watching the students change and become the people they had envisioned before his very eyes. When we think about our world, it is easy to become overwhelmed and feel powerless. But we cannot allow ourselves to believe that we have no agency at all. We must not only envision ourselves as Jeremiah envisioned his mother, pregnant with possibility and full of potential, but then we must go a step further. We must manifest a vision for ourselves, as these music students did in their letters, and begin to fulfill that potential. Hayom, today. We must acknowledge that even in our vulnerability, we still have a hand in the future that might be, and we must seize that moment. I want to try something, and I'm not going to make you put your faces on the ground. But I want you to picture yourself next year. It's Erev Rosh Hashanah 5786. You're sitting in the exact same spot in this sanctuary. What did this past year bring for you? Did it bring healing, self-awareness, love, a challenge that you overcame? How did you grow? Did you work on being kinder and actually seek that out within you? Did you reach your volunteering goal? Did you draw closer to your spouse or your kids or your parents or community? Were you able to be embraced by others? What change did you make to do that? Did you learn more about your faith? Did you learn more about yourself? Did you learn more about your relationship with God? Who have you become? If it's hard to answer all of these things at one time, just stick with one. What is one way in which you grew? Hold that in your mind. I want to invite us all today, Hayom, in this world in which we feel so vulnerable, to commit ourselves to this one piece of growth. Find some time in the next 10 days when the book of life is wide open and the new year is still pure potential. Take a seat, reflect, and then write yourself a letter. Write about who you want to be when Rosh Hashanah comes around again next year. Not a to-do list, not a list of worries about the potential messes that this year might bring, but a letter of how you want to show up as your potential self. Because starting today, Hayom, you've already gotten the A in the class. Now go live it. Shana Tova.